Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Welcome to our channel. Thanks for coming. We are finished with our current deck build. I just wanted to go over the entire thing, the entire process, in case you might have missed an episode or two. And before we do that, I just ask you to please click that subscribe button. It means a lot to us and we really appreciate you. Don't forget to leave us a comment too and let us know what you thought of this 4-month deck build. Yes, over 4 months we have been here. And we're gonna talk about this entire thing. We're gonna go over from the groundbreaking, from the demo, all the way to what we have, this finished, beautiful project. So the first thing we had to do was actually get a building permit, which took us about 6 months. There was a lot of speculation and issues with the building department because we're located on High Bank waterfront. There was tribal portions of the permit that had to be checked out to make sure that the tribal community didn't have any issues. Even though we're 200 feet back off the shoreline or 150 feet back, it was still quite a process to get us to this point. So once we achieved our permit, we had to break ground. So we dug our footings. Now one deck, there's actually 4 decks on the back of this house, and there's 1 on the front. Now the 4 decks on the back of the house were existing tile. They were kind of waterproof, they were failing. So they're starting to leak and starting to drip, and the clients were very unhappy. They're extremely hot in the summertime. We have western exposure, so the sun hits these decks and it becomes 180 degrees. You can't walk on them barefoot, like 150 to 180 degrees on this tile. Very hot, very uncomfortable, and just unbelievably difficult to use when they're that warm. So the bottom deck, the main deck that I'm standing in front of right now, the clients wanted that one enlarged. And that's where we started with this project, was designing this deck here to be enlarged. So we went ahead and we threw our Dr. Deck style into it. We added a curve, and I was probably one of the only people in the area that proposed, hey, we can build you a curved deck, but what are we gonna do to secure it as far as railings? How are we gonna make it safe but beautiful? So I showed them some curved glass options and they really liked that idea. So we started building this deck. We dug the holes to the specified engineered depth, width, had those inspected, and then I poured concrete, put some carbon fiber rebar in those 3 footings. So we only had to pour 3 footings for this entire deck. The rest of the decks are more like remodels, and the main deck was new construction. So we completely tore this deck down and started over. We dug the footings, we put in some Simpson concrete cement brackets, and we built up from there. That all had to be stringed out and carefully placed. Once those were cured, then we came up from there off of those brackets with 6x6 posts. Over here, we had to use laminated engineered glue lams, engineered beams. We had a 13-foot span between our center post and the outside post on each side. Since the deck was curved, I put the beam on an angle, so as the joist came out, we didn't have too much of a cantilever. If I would have left the beam straight like this, we would have had a massive cantilever, which probably wouldn't have passed engineering in the center. So by bringing the beam out like this, I was able to keep my cantilever short and still make 2x12 joists work. I think we're about 14 inches on center on this particular deck, so that we were able to make the engineering work for the inside of the deck and the cantilever of the deck. And that's why this beam is not straight. It's actually on a V like this, okay? So once the deck was framed, then we installed a waterproof bladder on top of that. Because we did all these curves, we heat bent the surface borders to match that curve on top of the decks, and it looks really nice. Once the decks were waterproofed, then we installed TimberTech AZEK dark hickory decking on each level. So once the homeowners came home, we finished framing the curve out of this main deck on a Friday. The rest of the decks were just supposed to remain straight. And the client came to me and said, we like this curved deck so much. Can you replicate that above us on our upper deck? And I'm like, well, I'd have to add some extra framing to your existing. Now the upper deck, all the joists cantilevered out the house. Whoever framed it originally put a bevel on the tops of all the joists to create the drainage it needed for the tile to drain. But it wasn't very much drainage, and that's why a lot of the tile failed, because the water was just sitting up there and getting through the grout and all that stuff. We ended up sistering new joists to all of the existing floor framing, which were LVLs. So they're extremely strong. They're already sticking out 6 feet, and they were 16 inches on center. So by adding an extra 1.5 inches, it put us closer to 14 inches on center. But then we brought them back into level, and then we glued and screwed those. And then I created an extra 2 feet in the center of that upper deck so I could create the matching curve to match this deck. I had to figure all this out to let the client know if it was actually possible or not. And it was. So we ended up shaving back the edges of the deck and then pushing out the center just so we could create the curve. So the upper deck does not have any beams or posts. It is waterproof as well. Same materials and curved glass with the Regal Ideas crystal rail and coastal curved glass installed. Once the decking was installed, we installed all the Regal Ideas crystal rail glass mounts. We had to lay those out very carefully because when you order curved glass, you only want to order it once, but you have to order it in advance or else it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get it. And then you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs like this, which is bad. So once we got these 2 decks done, all the fascia went on. It's a triple stack, triple layered fascia. So there's a main piece of multi-width that's actually integrated into the first piece of fascia, which actually is integrated into the bladder. The bladder actually goes over the top of that and keeps the decks waterproof so they don't leak in between the fascia boards and the ledger board. Then we added a lower section of half-by material for the lower section of the fascia. And then the upper section of the fascia, we wrapped the top of the deck boards. Like here's your decking right here. And then we always put our fascia, our top piece like this. So the top 2 pieces are actually the 1-by material, which we were able to Cortex. And then the third one, I call it a triple stack. The third piece of fascia, we actually face screwed with color matching screws. Some people actually Cortex the fascia as well, but TimberTech doesn't recommend it. They won't warranty it. And it does look nice to have it all completely Cortex, but you're only holding that fascia on by about 1/8 of an inch, and it's just not enough. I think things move around too much around here for that to work. So we don't do that. We actually use color matching stainless steel screws. And I think the finished look is really nice. So now that the fascia is all done, we've got our glass all mounted, it's all level and plumbed and ready to go. So after that was finished, we still had the undersides of the decks to do. So each layer of each deck has clear vertical grain cedar that costs more than the decking did, and you don't get as much coverage. So it's kind of a spendy part of the project. This is what the client wanted. This is what he's had in the past, and that's what he was determined to have. So we wanted to make sure that became a reality. We pre-stained all of those boards at my shop, both sides, before we brought them out. So that was a little bit of a logistics thing, but we got it handled. We got everything out here. We got all that installed. And then we put a nice little piece of dark hickory trim around all the curves to make that work. And just really pops nice with the rest of the project. So everything on this deck is dark hickory. There's no two-tone to it. It's all the same color. And I actually do like that look. It's a very nice look. And those Cortex hidden fasteners really hide the fasteners extremely well. Then we also use varying gauges of finish nails to nail up a lot of our trim. We're using an 18 gauge nail for all the small detail trim, all the curved trim on the underside of the fascia. And then some of our wall trims, we're using a 15 gauge stainless steel nail running through our DeWalt guns. So over here on the other side of the house, we have 2 exact matching cloned decks, I'll call them. And the client also came back to me. Originally, they just stuck out 6 inches past the beams, and we ripped all of the trim off all the posts. We left the beams in place. We took all the joists out, and then we reframed the decks, and we leveled them up because they had pretty severe drainage because of the tile decks that were on there before. We packed out the beams an inch and raised those up a little bit. And then we added 2 inches we went from a 2x10 to a 2x12 for our joists. So we actually packed the height 3 inches. So there was a 3-inch drain on these decks over here, which was quite a bit, and you could really see it, and it was awful. So by adding 2 inches to the thickness of the frame, plus an inch packing on the top of the beam, we were able to level those out. And then I told the client, it's like, hey man, we could probably curve these decks. They're not gonna be the same radius as over here, but we can probably add a curve to these. And he was like, please, let's do it because they're so small and they feel so tight. So we went ahead and we added 2 feet to the center of these decks over here. So this side of the house is a 17-foot radius. This side of the house is a 21-foot radius, but they are pretty close and there's not a whole lot that you can tell the difference between those 2 radiuses. I personally really like the detail that we did on the posts and the beam wraps. And if you notice the top deck, we were able to remove the posts that were holding up the middle of the beam because it was a laminated beam, an engineered beam. And we actually had a special bracket made to get rid of one of the posts on that upper deck. So there's a clean view coming out the door, looking out the window. There's no more posts on the upper deck. We couldn't do it on the lower deck unless we wanted to start replacing the beams to take out more posts. So we skipped on that, but we were able to do it on the upper deck. So we went ahead and did it. What's unique about each deck is the client had electricians come in and they wired up each deck on a wall switch with a 24-volt transformer with a dimmer so that they can turn on 1 to 4 decks all at the same time with different switches, and they can adjust the intensity of the glow that the glass has depending on how bright or how little light they want coming from the railing. They said they can turn it down to the point where just the edges glow, or they can turn it all the way up so the glass glows a nice, beautiful blue. Once all the softening's done, we had gutters added so that those gutters drain off and right into existing downspouts. The main deck actually drains a different direction and it's gonna be tied into existing ground drainage, but everything has a place where the water gets taken out and diverted so it's not all just pooling up in the yard. And then the final touch was the client added some really beautiful lighting to the back side of the deck and a really nice look. Hand selected all those and the bulbs that went into it. Those are all wired up and installed as well. So now that this is kind of the explanation, let's go up to the front deck and we'll explain that one as well. All right, guys, and here we are on the front of the house. There was a little Juliet balcony deck that was part of the house. It was there when the client bought the house. It was just a 2-foot by 6-foot deck. Didn't have much purpose except it was just kind of a look that I think they were going for this Mediterranean look, and that was something you see a lot overseas. So that was part of this house. Clients weren't really happy with it. It was kind of an old style wrought iron railing that was kind of rusting and falling apart. So we took that down. We removed all the tile. There's actually 2 layers of tile. I've never seen this before. 2 layers of tile, cement board, plywood, and then 2x10 joists that kicked back into the house, quite deep. I never did really figure out how far back they went. I know it was over 12 feet. These 2x10s are sistered to some I-joists, okay? So what we did was we tore all that apart, we tore all the wall blocks out, and then we sistered 2x12 joists to the 2x10s, we glued them, and then I screwed back as far as I could reach and got additional fasteners beyond the pivot point of the cantilever of the house. And then I brought the center of this deck out an additional 16 inches. Now I got a lot of backlash on this on the internet. I'll be honest with you. After it was framed, I got up there and I jumped up and down on this deck. And I actually experienced no deflection at all on that deck, which usually on every deck, we have a little bit of deflection. Deflection is having a little bit of bounce or a little bit of the wood wanting to give as you jump up and down or give it weight. I was so impressed with how strong this little deck ended up being. I'm completely confident it's never gonna fail. You could pack that thing shoulder to shoulder, put 10 people out here, and it will not fail. So we basically built it up the same way after we framed it. We used a piece of 5/4 by 12 AZEK trim, Paint Pro, as the curved rim joist. And then we were able to frame in and build around that and attach all our fascia pieces to it and that, so on and so forth. We also did the exact same rail system, which is the Regal Ideas crystal rail. We had all the pods custom powder coated. Again, it's an expense and it's time consuming because you have to mess around with all the set screws and make sure everything fits properly and that it'll still work like it was designed to. So after that, we finished it off by putting the same exact matching cedar underneath. Now on the actual piece of trim that we did, the trim for around the cedar, we tried to cold bend that. This is a 7-foot radius, much tighter than anything out back. and we broke that trim trying to bend it. So we actually had to fire up our heating blankets and heat up the trim and then mold it to the curve, and so we would be able to get it to install properly up against that tight curve. So that's done. Everything's done except for the gutter on this front side of the house. We just have to call the gutter company, which I have. Basically, that one's done. Same tricks on the light switch. It's on a wall switch with a dimmer, so he can turn this on and let it glow bright or very dim or not at all. So just kind of a cool way to add that extra pizzazz onto your deck. So that's about it, guys. That's all we have for you. We're basically cleaning up, and we're gonna be taking a small break. I think we'll still be putting out some videos for you, but just gonna take a couple weeks to reflect and go attend a couple trade shows. So if you're out and about and you see us, come say hi. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Don't forget to comment on this video. Let me know what you thought of these residential decks. In my opinion, they're more like commercial hotel luxury resorts. And I'll see you guys on the next build. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.